one year I was in New Jersey, and I used to, when I was in New Jersey, I used to call up Rav Fullman every couple days or once a week or once a week. And we would speak. And then it happened that I called him up in some afternoon by us, which was the evening of Yom Hazikaron. And on the phone, he put on the siren that went off. As we were talking, the siren went off.
Wow.
And I remember in the middle of New Jersey listening to the siren from the phone in Israel. It was like,
amazing.
And the siren finished, and then he said, always gave me a bracha that I should, no matter where I am, should have a tzino. What's a tzino?
Pipe.
A pipeline that takes me direct to Eretz Israel. So that was an experience, and that I kacha have with me. So Bezrat Hashem, this learning in the evening of Yom Hazikaron and leading up to Yom Haatzmaut will be a direct pipeline. For those who are Eretz Israel, we should be connected, and those who are in Chutz La'aretz can much feel connected, hopefully, through being together.
Shlomo, did the siren go off yet?
Yes, it went off an hour ago. An hour, yeah, at 8 o'clock. So, Beseder. So I decided to do what we call a classic move and learn, because we were learning Tanach and we were learning Nevi'im. So I wanted to learn very famous psukim in Yom Haatzmaut, which are called in Hebrew Chazon Ha'atzamot Ha'yeveshot. It's the famous vision of Yechezkel, who sees the dry bones. We'll read it together. If you know the psukim, I would love to hear. I didn't have so much time to prepare this yul, so I would love to hear your take on it, but also suggest to come and try to read it as we try to do in a more sort of clean, or I would say direct way, and maybe put aside some of the ideological assumptions we have when we read these psukim, because sometimes we hear psukim or we hear texts when we grow up or when we're in certain communities, and then it gets a connotation or it gets a meaning according to the agenda. So I'm not saying it's not in here. I just want to be sort of free from that. So this is Yechezkel. The book of Yechezkel is known to be, I would say, split into two main pieces. There's a couple. Obviously, you could. Just a second. Sorry. Basically, we know that Ishayahu is known to be the Navi that says mainly Nevuot Nechama, is saying a lot of Nevuot Nechama. And Yirmiyahu is known for the Navi who's saying what's called Nevuot Poranut, who's saying the bad Nevuot, the bad prophecies, or the, I guess, warning prophecies. And Yechezkel is split in the middle. The first half of the book is very harsh prophecies demanding the people to, right? He's rebuking, I would say it's rebuking the people. And the second half is all the most, I guess, what did we say, Nechama, is comforting and even a lot of parts that when people think about the building of the Bet HaMikdash HaShlishi or Gog HaMagog and how do you say, apocalyptic pieces of the Tanakh appear in the second part of Yechezkel. So it's what we're going to see tonight is the movement, or I'd say the chapter that's right in the middle of both pieces. Yechezkel as a Navi is maybe one of the only Navim or the only Navi that's not in Eretz Israel. He's sitting in a Hakvar, which is in Bavel, and he is together with the first people who were exiled from Judah, from Judea. That means that the 10 Shvatim were exiled already years before, and now the exile from Judea, right, and leading up to the destruction of the first temple is the period where Yechezkel is living, and he needs to be he's assigned to be the Navi, the prophet, who is going with them throughout this. And and it's very interesting to see how he works with this. Now, when he rebukes them, it's Rav Steinsaltz used to speak about this, that just a second, Oneg is still awake. Okay. Try again.
You didn't put back your voice. We can't hear. Okay.
Hear me?
Yeah.
The rebuke. So he's sitting with them. The first chapter, maybe we'll see next week. We were supposed to look at it this week. Is in Nahar Kvar. He's sitting on the river in Bavel, and then he's speaking to the people, and he starts rebuking them. And one of the interesting things that you could see is that he becomes very harsh in his words and in his analogies and in his rebuking. And Rav Steinsaltz used to like to quote this and show how what happened to Yechezkel, as opposed to maybe other Nevi'im, is that people actually liked listening to him. And because they enjoyed listening to him, he had to become more and more, his words had to become more and more harsh, and in order to get his message out, because they would come and it would be like a sermon where he's rebuking the people, and everybody would come out and say, "Hear what a beautiful poem he just said," or "Did you see how he put that so nicely?" or "That was amazing." And he's like, "What do you mean amazing? I'm trying to like kick you, and get you moving, and you're saying how beautiful it is." So that's one of the things we see about Yechezkel, is that he has very powerful analogies and nevuot and wordings. And this perek that we're going to see is right in the, I said that before, I'm just noting again, right as in between of the rebuke and the nechama, the comforting. And it's interesting to know that and see that in mind. So we're going to start. הייתה עלי יד אדוני, ויוציאני ברוח אדוני, ויניחני בתוך הבקעה, והיא מלאה עצמות. So there was the hand of the Lord came upon me, which is an expression that appears a couple times in Yechezkel. doesn't appear so much in the Tanach, but right, what does it mean that the hand of God was upon me? Right, some sort of feeling, right, some sort of something that's also not really that's not he didn't really choose, right? God's hand was placed on him, came upon me, and took him out. So this sort of understanding that the Navi was placed inside somewhere, and the hand of God had to come and sort of right take him out of there and place him somewhere else. But and also see these words beruach Adonai. How was he taken out? With the ruach, with the spirit of God. Now the ruach is going to be very important in this story. So it's not stam that Hashem takes him out through the ruach, through the breath, or through the spirit of the Lord. Vayancheni betoch habik'ah, and he placed me in the valley. Vehi melea atzamot, and the valley was full of bones. Vehevirani aleim saviv saviv. I'm going to read it quickly, and then we'll go back to understand. He led me all around them. Vehine rabot me'od al pnei habik'ah. There's many bones in this valley. Vehine yeveshot me'od, and they were very dry. What does it mean that they were very dry? I think that means that, what?
They've been there for a long time.
They've been there for a long time, right? They've been there for a long time, or that whatever happened to them, to their flesh, was total, meaning they were left only with the bones. So this expression is, sorry to say, but how do you say quantity and quality? So it's the quantity when he says rabot me'od, many bones. And then the quality of them, right, a negative quality, obviously, is that they're very dry, meaning they have nothing that's life in them. Because you could assume that if they're not so dry, so they still have some sort of flesh, some sort of life that's still on them. Vayomer elai, and God says to him, Ben Adam, hatechayena atzamot ha'ele, can these bones come alive? Va'omar Adonai ata yadata. So Hashem takes him out to this place. By the way, I didn't say, but there's a machloket in Chachmei Israel, and it starts in the Gemara and then it continues in the philosophers. Did this really happen? So some say that it's all a vision, and some say that it actually really happened, that God took him and he saw real bones, and Chazal in the Gemara tried to identify if it's real bones, whose bones are these? But I want to put that aside and maybe go back to it after we read the whole story, but have that in mind. Is this really happening? Is this a vision? And he takes him and places him in this place. And what's interesting here is that God opens up a dialogue with the Navi. Vayomer Elai, Hashem says to him, Ben Adam atechayena atzamot ha'ele. Can these bones come alive? Now, if God would ask you that question, what are you supposed to answer? I mean, yes, no, maybe, that's right. What, right? It's a tricky question. What?
Yeah, very well. If I was asked that question, I'd say, if you don't know, how am I supposed to know?
Well, that's exactly what Yechezkel answers. What are you asking me? You're in charge, right? So that's better than saying, yes, they could come alive, or no, they can't come alive. Right? because and exactly what you're saying is what Yechezkel said. Va'omar Adonai ata yadata, you know.
Hmm?
Now, what is this answer? Is he saying you know because you're tricking me? I don't know what to say, or is this said in a very humble way? Right? I don't know. You know, right? Some humility before God. Um, it's really interesting. Now, why does God need to open this up as a dialogue? Right? Why is this the way to deal with it? Um, is this a
But
rhetorical
it,
question from
I
God,
was
or,
gonna
or
say,
is he really
it seems
looking
like
for an answer?
it seems like it's a rhetorical question or a way to engage always with a question, right? Like that's how we engage people is by asking
Right.
questions.
Right. So
So
we
that
know
makes
that
sense.
we've spoken about it, right, in different places. Yeah, in the Tanach, where Hashem says to Adam Rishon Ayeka, right, and we know that God knows where Adam is, right? He's not asking him where you are. So if it's a rhetorical question, it's a question that's inviting the Navi to engage.
Yeah.
So then what is the answer? So then the Navi's answers is actually disengagement, right? As opposed to answering, yes, maybe, please do, right? He's saying, it's your issue. It's not my issue. Understand what I'm saying? The Navi sort of is
He's not playing the
giving him
game.
right. Now, why is this important? Because one of the explanations for this chapter, I see I'm not able to read the whole thing and then go back, so I'm just going to say it as we learn. We spoke about, I think last week or a couple times, that there's some of the nevuot are called nevuot akdasha. There's prophecies that are the prophecies where the Navi gets his assignment. And we said Ishayahu, when he sees Kadosh, 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 and he sees that whole thing, then he gets his assignment to start becoming a prophet. And some explanations say that this vision is the beginning of the second part of Yechezkel's prophecy of saying Nechamot. So if we go back to the first half of the book, we'll say Yechezkel is used to rebuke the people. Now God takes him in front of these bones, these many bones, and these very dry bones, and says to them, what could we do with these? And part of what we see with Nevi'im when they are led to get a new assignment is that they're not so, many times they're not jumping to do it, right? We know that from Moshe, for example. When Hashem says to Moshe at Esneh, go to that, and he says, right, all these reasons why he's not the right person to do it. So when Yechezkel says, Vayomar Adonai ata yadata, he's also throwing back sort of the assignment. Understand what I'm saying? He's saying, I don't know, it's your tafkid, it's your purpose to do something with bones. That's not me. And what happens now that this becomes a dialogue, and we'll read the next pasuk according to this reading. Vayomer Elai, Hashem says to me, Hinaveh al haatzmaut haeleh, prophesies on these bones, or right over these bones. Ve'amarta alehem haatzmaut hayaveshot shim'u dvar Adonai. Speak to these dry bones and tell them, listen to the words of God. Ko amar Adonai la'atzamot haeleh. Thus said the Lord to these bones, Hine ani mavi bachem ruach v'chitem. I will, right, put in you, the ruach, the spirit, the breath, and you will come alive. And you remember that ruach that we began with, that Hashem put a ruach in Yechezkel? So now, the same way that God had put a spirit in Yechezkel and took him out of his own place, Hashem is asking or demanding, leading the Navi to do the same action that happened to him into these Haatzmaut. The same way God has put a breath into the Navi has to go and do that onto the bones. And he says to V'natati alechem, and we see that it works in stages. V'natati alechem gidim, right? I'll put upon you, what is it called? What is gidim? What's this word? I can't read it. Sinews?
Sinews.
Sinews, sorry.
Sin-
So I will connect sinews. Ve'eleti alechem basar, I'll cover you with flesh. Ve'karamti alechem or, and I will form skin upon you. Ve'natati b'chem ruach, and then I shall put breath into you. V'chitem, you will come alive. V'datem ki ani Adonai. Right? What happens at the end, you will know that I am the Lord. That's the outcome of coming alive. Okay, now the Navi comes back and says, V'nibeti kasher tzuveti, I prophesied as has been commanded, V'hi kol ki Navi, and as I was prophesying, I heard a voice, V'nei rash, and suddenly I heard a loud noise, V'tikrevu atzamot etzem el atzmo, and the bones had come together, bone to the matching bone. Now over here, what's going on here? He's starting to prophesize onto the bones, and it's starting to work. Now, what happens is that the Navi is, I think, the way I read this, Yechezkel is sort of not ready for what's going to happen. It's actually happening. It's suddenly he hears noise. He hears, now, it's real. These bones are actually moving and connecting. And if we're thinking about him being around all these bones and they're moving, it makes noise. And this feeling of a noisy, right, is something that catches him like unprepared. Now, what is itkarvu atzmot etzem el atzmo? So it seems like that these bones had come together and formed into one sort of skeleton or one sort of person. But we have to remember that they were scattered all over the valley. So part of what had to do is that the bones had to find the right bones. Understand the image? It's now, I don't know. I mean, reading this a couple of days after Yom HaShoah is terrible, right? Thinking about the scattered bones not being with their own, right? Not being with their connected bones that's the tragedy of what he's seeing. And then, right, this notion of that we have of connecting the bones and bringing the bones. And I mean, when I was in high school, I went like many of the Israelis to Poland to see the camps, and we went to a very very far cemetery because some of the people wanted to visit some specific Rebbe, and it wasn't on the route. And we got there, and as we were visiting the Rebbe, we walked around the cemetery. It was a Jewish cemetery, and there were bones there that we had to bury, Jewish bones that that the Polish people who helped the Germans kill the Jews in Izbica, in that little town, did not cover it, and it's not one of these famous places where people go to. And there were bones that were scattered there, and we had to collect them and mamash bury them. So this image of the different bones finding each other is very finding themselves, right? Finding their original being is very, very chazak. V'ra'iti, but then he says, Ve'ine alehem gidim ubasar ala, ve'ikram alehem or milamala, ve'ruach en bahem. I looked, and there were sinews on them, and then the flesh had grown, right? The different stages happened one after each other, and skin had formed over them, but there was no breath in them. Now, what's happening here? The body was formed, but the breath was not there. So this takes us straight away to Bereshit, right? How God formed Adam Rishon, and then he had to Vaypach b'apav nishmat chaim. He had to put the breath of God into the person, the spirit. What I think is amazing is that the imagery here goes stage after stage: flesh, sinews, bones, sinews, flesh, and then skin, but there's no ruach. Vayomer Elai. Now God has to come here and intervene again. Vayomer Elai, ינבא אל הרוח, ינבא בן אדם, ואמרת אל הרוח, כה אמר אדוני אלוהים, מארבע רוחות בואי הרוח, ופחי בהרוגים האלה וחיו. Then he said on me, prophesize on the breath, prophesize, say to the breath, right? This is what said the Lord, הנה בן אדם, אמרת אל הרוח, כה אמר אדוני, מארבע רוחות, from all four sides of the world, boi ruach, right? I want this spirit to come from all the sides of
All the winds.
right. Now, I think this needs to read this in a certain tone, I would say in a sort of intensity. Hashem says to the Navi, please continue prophesying and prophesize to the spirit. That means that the prophet has stopped in the middle of the work. And the way I read this is that Hashem is sort of interfering and saying to him, please don't stop here. Continue prophesying. Make this body really come alive by putting him the spirit in. Right? And I have a feeling, I can't explain it because it's just the feeling of the way I'm reading it, is that he's kind of saying to him, we have one more moment that you could put in this body, the spirit, because if not, it's not going to work. Now in this pasuk, I just wanted also to note two more things. The ruach, this ruach is collected from, right, is gathered from all four parts of the world, which has, maybe we'll speak about it afterwards, but it has this understanding that there's something scattered in the spirit, the same way that the bones are all scattered in the valley and need to be connected. The same way the spirit is spread out in the whole world, and it needs to be connected from all four sides to one place. And the second note is that Ufchi, he says you should breathe it, baharugim ha'ele, in these killed people. What is it, slain?
Man is killed. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, up to this pasuk, we're already in pasuk tet. We already read most of the description of this vision. There was no description of who these people are.
Mhm.
There was no identification, and there still isn't. But we have now a specific explanation that they are harugim, that they're slain, but it still doesn't tell us who are these harugim. Are they Jewish? Are they not Jewish? Are they from what kind of a war, a battle? When did this happen? We don't know, but it's a vision that he's seeing. V'inabeti kasher tzivani, and Chazkel says, I had prophesied the same way as I was commanded. V'tavo b'hem haruach, and the Spirit has come to them. V'chayu, and they came alive. V'yamdu al raglehem, and they stood on their feet. Chayil gadol me'od me'od, a very vast, I would say, chayil, army.
Mhm.
Now this goes back, if they're harugim, if they're slain, so obviously when they come alive, they're going to be an army. Okay, so up to here is the vision. From the next pasuk onwards, the Navi gives what's called peshiv, the explanation of the vision. Most of the times in the Nevi'im, when they bring a vision, they also continue to explain it. We don't have to guess what the analogy is for or what is the vision standing for. But before that, before we'll read Yechezkel's explanation, any comments about this vision? It's kind of intense, but we're in Yom Hazikaron and we're reading about these harugim. I think it's
So they read this in the Tekes on Yom HaZikaron. They read this nevuah.
oh, they read it,
Rav.
yeah.
Yeah. So they related to
Very-
like chayalim. It gave their lives for.
Right. But I think here, what I wanted to say before we move on is, right, it's very famous to use it in Yom HaZikaron, and it's very appropriate. What I wanted to say here is that what is the relationship between a Navi and between Hashem? It could have been a different vision. The Navi could have stood there and saw it happen. He could have seen God make these bones come together and become people and come alive, and the Navi could witness this and prophesize it to us. But for some reason, Hashem is not interested in that kind of vision. Hashem is interested in a vision that actually the Navi, the prophet himself, is creating it. And even a few times here, Hashem says to him, you need to prophesize, you need to do it, you need to call the Spirit. In some way, we see the dependence of God on his prophet. And
I was gonna say, it seems like in some ways it's more for the prophet than it is for the people.
what does that mean?
Meaning, it seems like it's more about his growth or his relationship to Hashem, or it feels more personal maybe than the idea of the way that we think of prophets or Nevi'im or prophecies as really being for the greater good of Am Yisrael. Seems very specific. Like I can't really. There's something like,
No, I understand what you're saying.
you know what I'm saying? I don't know how to explain it, but it feels very. I mean, I guess we've had this before. We've had certain Nevi'im
Yeah.
that we've studied where we see that the prophecy seems very much related to the Navi rather than this is something that's going to move Am Yisrael forward.
I agree with you, except I don't think it's rather. It's not a or either.
An either or.
I think what's going on here is that the prophet becomes not only I would say what we spoke about, a tzino, right? It's not only a sort of some clean vessel that the words of God come out through him. He's not a
Right.
telephone, right? It's not like he's not an instrument that God just needs to have a person that he could speak through. The Navi is demanded to bring himself to the work of prophecy. And yes, it is for the people, but it needs to go through him.
Right.
God, Hashem has no problem to make people alive, right? I'm going back to this amazing pasuk, in my opinion, and also so a little bit disturbing pasuk, where he says to them at the beginning, "Vayomer elai ben adam, hatechayena atzamot haele?" Are these bones able to come alive? V'amar Adonai Elohim ata yadata, you know, right? And God's answer for that is, I don't care if I know, I need you to know. I know that I know, right? Of course, I'm God. But what about you? What are you able to bring the bones together and alive? Is there a prophet, a person, a leader that's able to take upon himself the assignment? It seems clear, right, that these psukim speak about Tchiyat HaMetim, but according to Chazal, they don't. Because the Gemara asks, Tchiyat HaMetim min HaTorah minayin? How do we know that there's Tchiyat HaMetim? And by asking that, they assume that this is not Tchiyat HaMetim, at least according to most opinions in the Gemara there. They're assuming that this is a vision that Yechezkel experienced, saw. This is not the Tchiyat HaMetim we speak about. Why am I bringing that? Because I'm saying God could do Tchiyat HaMetim. That's not a big deal for him. He's God. He could do whatever he wants. What could you do as a prophet? And I'm reminding us that this is after all the chapters of rebuking. So now Hashem is saying to him, you did your rebuking. Now could you go to the valley and gather and bring them together? That's an assignment. And we see here that the Navi himself is able to do it by steps. It mamash dramatizes it, but it also allows him, he's first able to build the body. But then Hashem says to him, you did a good job, now get the spirit in it, make it alive. It's not enough to build the body. I'm gonna take it just for a moment to the analogy that we speak about on Yom Haatzmaut. It's not enough to build a country that's a body if it doesn't have the spirit, right? It's not enough to gather the bones but not have the flesh. It's not enough to have the flesh if it doesn't have the skin. It's not enough to have the skin if it doesn't have the spirit, if it doesn't have the ruach, if it doesn't have the neshama in it. So the Navi has to go through this sort of process of starting to build and then stopping and then being commanded to continue. It's not one stage. It can't be in one stage. Okay, let's see the second half of this. And it says the Navi and Hashem explaining the vision. Now, this pasuk, the next pasuk, is a fascinating opportunity that we don't have many times in the Tanach. And this is realizing what is the vision or the words of Nevuah based on. Hashem says to him, Vayomer alai, ben Adam, ha'atzamot ha'ele, these bones that you saw, kol bet Israel hema. They are the bones of all of Bet Israel. Not a specific person, not even a specific people or community, all of Am Yisrael. Now, Hashem here in the next words is quoting the words of the people of Israel. Hine omrim, here they are saying, Yavshu atzmoteinu, ve'avda tikvatenu nigzarnu lanu. Our bones are dried up, our hope is gone, we are doomed. Who is saying this? Am Yisrael, in the Gola, in the Galut. Hashem is quoting the people of Israel. It's like, what are people saying? What if you would go out in Bavel in the middle of the process of the destruction of the temple, and you would ask a person, so what's going on? And he would tell you, our bones are dry. We are doomed. So going back to the vision, this vision is what the people of Israel are thinking upon themselves. What is Yechezkel doing? He is now prophesizing to the people what they're saying upon themselves. But he needs to take their words and put in them spirit and put them alive. You're saying that you are dry bones? Okay, I'm not denying that you are dry bones. We are dry bones. He's not denying the people's saying. He's not denying their experience. Now he's saying, okay, now we have to work with this. Now we have to put them together. Now we have to bring them alive. This is why you need to prophesy and tell them. Here are the words of God. I'm opening up your tombs, your grave tombs. And I will take you out of your graves. Ami, my nation. El admat Israel. Right, and I think that there's a nigud. What's a nigud? Not contradiction.
Contrast.
A contrast between the valley and the Adamah of Eretz Israel. The valley and the Gola, which is open, which is this field of war, of battle, of scattered. And I will take you out of that and bring you to the land of Eretz Israel. V'idatem, and you will know, ki ani Adonai, that I am God, b'fitchi et kivrotechem, when I open up your graves, u'be'aloti etchem mikivrotechem ami, and when I take you out of your graves and bring you to Eretz Israel, v'natati ruchi bachem, I will put my breath into you, my spirit. V'inachti etchem al admatchem. Hinachti etchem goes back to the beginning of the vision, where, again, the experience of the Navi has to become the experience of the people. Vayanicheni betoch habikah. Vayanicheni means I placed you in the bikah. Hashem says the same thing that you went through, where am I? Oh, more, sorry. Vehinachti etchem al admatchem. I will place you in your adama. Vidatem ki ani Adonai dibarti ve'asiti ne'um Adonai. And you will know that I am the God. This is what I did, right? So this is the vision. I don't know if this is how it's read. I think it medaber b'fnei atzmo, how do you say it? It speaks for itself, right? In many ways, and it's not stam that it's very famous. I didn't bring. I was thinking to quote Chazal and to bring their whole all what they say, but I didn't have time to load the Gemara up. I mentioned this in a small quote that the Gemara, there's a very famous Gemara about this in Sanhedrin, and there's a discussion of who these people were. Who were these dead people? So Rabbi Eliezer says that, and also the other question is, if this was a real vision, so then where did these people go? They came alive, and then what? I'll go out of this screen share because I'm reading from the book here, but you don't have. Yeah. So if we take this vision seriously, we have to ask: so who are these people, and where did they go, and what happened to them? So Rabbi Eliezer says, "Metim shechya Yechezkel amdu al raglehem ve'amru shira v'metu." The dead that Yechezkel had brought alive were literally dead people who came alive. They said a praise, amru shira v'metu, and died, went back to die. And then we have a different explanation from Rabbi Eliezer, בנו של רבי יוסי הגלילי. מתים שהיה יחזקאל, שהחיה יחזקאל, עלו לארץ ישראל, meaning they came from Babel, they came to ארץ ישראל, ונשאו נשים, והולידו בנים ובנות, they got married, and had children, boys and girls. What a very concrete way of looking at it. And one of the people said there, Amad Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, al raglav ve'amar, ani mibnei bneihem. He had some masoret, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, and says, yes, I'm the Eineklach of one of these dead people who, right? I'm one of their grandkids. A different explanation from Rabbi Eli says that mashalaya, the whole thing is never happened, and it's
Parable.
and it's a parable. This is just these are the main, I would say main. Right, and there's 5 different. I'm reading just from a sikun, from not even from the Gemara, but who were these dead people at first? So this is what happened with them. But who were they originally? When did they die? When were they killed? So there's one explanation that says that they were bnei Ephraim shiatzu mimitzrayim terem et v'ne'ergu al yedei plishtim. So there were a group of people from Ephraim that tried to leave Mitzrayim too early, and they got killed by Plishtim, and these are their bones. There's a different explanation that is Bnei Adam shekafru b'tchiyat hametim. These are specifically people who did not believe in tchiyat hametim, So they had to go through it on their own in order to realize that it's true. Others that there's another opinion that they're so dry because they had no mitzvot. The mitzvot gives a person some sort of life. So the dryness of the Haatzmaut represents these people that are maybe have no mitzvot, have no good deeds. Another explanation is that these are people who did avodah zarah in Bet HaMikdash. And the last explanation is that these are, which are probably, this is probably the most pshat, is that these are soldiers that got killed in the battles with Nebuchadnezzar, who came to conquer Eretz Israel, Bet HaMikdash, and I would imagine that that's the pshat. Beseder, I don't. I think that the main parts that I take when I'm reading this today is mamash this involvement of the Navi, and if I want to take it back to our lives, if I want to take it to these days, right? And they say this is the most Zionistic chapter of the Tanach. One of the things that the Tzionut tried to say is that people need to be involved. It's not a godly sort of assignment that needs to happen on its own. And right, there is people who say that right, Bet HaMikdash will fall from the sky. People, right, the people of Israel will be gathered by Mashiach. But who is Mashiach? What is, right? Hashem is telling us in this nevuah, you need to be a prophet who gathers the bones, who gathers the spirit and puts them together. And this prophecy is doing two things. It's taking, I'm going back to the things we said before, it's taking the people's words, the people's perspective, and working with it. We're not going against people's perspective. If people feel that they are bones, dry bones, then we accept that. We're not saying, no, you're not. You're alive, right? You're not alive. You're dead. You're in galut. You went through the worst. You have nothing. You don't even have flesh or anything on you, right? The ability of saying that and accepting that, which, by the way, that's part of the Navi needing to go out to the field. As long as the Navi is in his own home, in his own place, he doesn't see that. He's not exposed to it. You need to come out of yourself and be exposed to the tragedy and accept it. Accept that is reality. That's what happened. That's where we are. And from that acceptance, to be a prophet and to gather and to bring the spirit and to prophesize and not just say, God, you know better. God is telling us, no, I don't want to know. I want you to be the one who's doing it. Tchiyat HaMetim, according to Yechezkel here, is people, right? It's the prophet doing it, not the God. Not that God is doing Tchiyat HaMetim. Thoughts, comments, questions? Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it's just making me think again of like last week's conversation of the place that we were talking about, like not always being so clear where Hashem needs to be left to do his thing on his own, right? Like what we talked about in the Parsha last week, versus where either Bnei Israel or Nachshon or the prophet here Yechezkel, like where it's such a like fascinating dynamic to think about in so many different aspects and areas of the Tanakh. Like just that relationship of how do we move things forward for ourselves? Is it when do we push forward, and when do we sit back and let Hashem do what he needs to do? Like I just feel like that's like such a theme right now.
Yeah. And
It's not always so clear.
right. It's not clear. And how when you take responsibility as a person, how do you not forget God? Right? That's a big theme in Sefer
Right.
Dvarim, for example, right? When you gain power and when you gain, right? When you are doing, when you're achieving as a person, how do you not forget that God is involved? That is one problem that I think Tanach is in prophecy is dealing with. And the other side is being too religious, I would say, right? Is only putting it on God and throwing it back to Hashem and not taking the
Right.
responsibility.
Right. Right.
And
I think in all of our lives, we are constantly finding that, like the Shvil HaZahav, of where is that partnership.
right. And
The other thing that I think is so interesting is, I was just going to change topics. It's so interesting which Navi gets which prophecy, like how, like it's such a kind of great, because they're all so intense and so much to take in, and that is, I'm sure, not an act like when we talk about like who the prophet is, like that is a fascinating idea also.
right. It's when we learn things in depth, you see that you get to like, and it's hard because the Nevi'im in that way are difficult, but okay, Sheila is done right now because baby's in the frame.
Can we see him? Baby. Hi.
No, it's not.
God, he's so cute.
Hi,
Hi, baby.
Okay, this is in a shiur about Chiyat HaMetim. I'm just putting it out there.
And he's so awake.
He looks like other tech babies.
Other Spivack, right?
He looks like, yeah.
Everybody else.
Okay.
so
Hi.
sweet.
In that dynamic of which prophet says what, it is clear that there's personalities and that any generation you have to really learn the prophets with the background of the generation and the geography of where they are. There are prophets that prophesize in Judea, and there's prophets that prophesize in the kingdom of Israel, and there's prophets that, and Chazal say that there's no prophecy out of Eretz Israel. So how could it be that Yechezkel is in Chutz La'aretz receiving prophecy? That's a question in the Gemara.
Right.
And they say that he could prophesize in Chutz La'aretz because he's really prophesizing leading to Eretz Israel. About Eretz Israel. But it's and as I said, Yechezkel is told now to prophesize about Tchiyat HaMetim after he was told for 30 chapters to rebuke them. So what kind of movement that he needs to go from? We see this again with Moshe Rabbeinu, how in one place he needs to rebuke, in the other place he needs to hug them as a parent. And what kind of a movement does Yechezkel need to go through himself now, which will lead him, by the way, at the end of the book of Yechezkel, to go into the very details of what the Bet HaMikdash will look like when you rebuild it. And this is he's saying as the destruction is happening. So to be able to look at the destruction and prophesize the rebuilding of the temple requires, right, a different vision. And בסדר, I think we spoke about a lot here. We could go into Yom Haatzmaut, Yom Hazikaron. I don't know, is this chapter more for Yom Hazikaron or more for Yom Haatzmaut? I don't know. it's
Well, I think that's the balance, right? You have to have one to have the other.
That's the Israeli way of doing it. That's
The dialectic, right?
Yeah. Right, the ability of
enjoyed your explanation, how you put it across, and found it very inspiring in a positive way, that we have to step forward and do our thing and not sit back, and Hashem is there pushing us along, and it's mamash inspiring.
Yeah.
Very inspiring.
Yeah, and for me, I do want to conclude, and I think having this also, again, bringing Rav Steinsaltz in here, I think a lot of what Rav Steinsaltz was trying to do was saying, okay, we built the body. I said this in a small comment, but I want to, we have the body, but where's the spirit?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we sometimes, I don't know, this year, for example, right, being so involved in politics and in the way our country looks right now, it kind of, it doesn't give the most, how do you say, cheshek, desire to celebrate, right, the flag of Israel when we see how our leaders and our, but we do celebrate, because we know that it's deeper than these people who will in 5, 10, 20, 50 years will not be here anymore. So
talking about in 6 months they're out of the Knesset.
No, Bibi Netanyahu will be here forever, but all the rest will leave. So
Forever.
But anyways, what I wanted to say is,
Tell them PK's joke about
what did you say?
He must be from Shalhevet. He must be from the lineage of David.
Oh, yeah, Pitria decided that Bibi Netanyahu is from the lineage of David HaMelech because he has the crown forever. So anyways, but being serious for a moment, what Rav Steinsaltz tried to say is that we came to Israel, we brought the bones together, but where's the spirit? Where what did we do? Who's connecting the breath of Am Yisrael, right? And that could be done by translating the Talmud and bringing us the ability of learning the Talmud and the Tanach and teaching, and then, right, building communities and schools and people who are talking about the spirit of Am Yisrael and not only the body. And Rav Kook spoke about that also in a famous, and this will be really the last comment, there's a famous eulogy that Rav Kook had said or written when Theodor Herzl died. And Rav Kook explained there, according to the Nevi'im and according to Chazal and Kabbalah, that there's 2 types of Mashiach. Maybe we'll learn this also once. There's what's called Mashiach ben Yosef. This appears in the next chapter in Yechezkel, and Mashiach ben David. And Rav Kook explains that Mashiach ben Yosef is the Mashiach that will come and take care of all the physical needs of Am Yisrael. And Mashiach ben David is the Mashiach that will come to right, sort of inject the spirit of Am Yisrael, renew the spirit of Am Yisrael. And Rav Kook said this as a eulogy for Herzl by saying, Ke'ilu he was Mashiach ben Yosef. In what way? in a way that he came to take care of the body. We need a state, we need a formal place for us, we need, right? And he said, that's great, that's important, but that's not enough. And I feel like this is a little bit, you could see this also very chazak in this perek. Okay, so we should have a Chag Sameach and
Amen. Thank
Yom
you.
Hazikaron first. We should באמת be in the memory and then be in the Chag Sameach.
Amen.
Okay,
Thank you.
להתראות.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shlomo.
Good
Bye.
night.